It's all too familiar of a story. A driver's career peters off in F1, their contract is expiring, and without interest from another team, they make a move to IndyCar. It's a smart career choice, and not too long into their IndyCar career, once they get used to it, they begin to thrive. But why do we never see it go the other way? I really started wondering this question last week because of this comment on my last video, and it made me realize that it really doesn't go the other way, which is understandable, but what's the real reason? Well, I'm sure that some will just say that IndyCar isn't as good as F1, and I don't agree, but you're entitled to your own opinion. But even if you do say that, other series like Super Formula are seen as underneath F1, but they still produce F1 drivers. So what makes IndyCar so different from the rest? Well, the path to IndyCar from F1 brings along quite a good path. F1 kind of spits out drivers as with only 22 seats on the grid and a pretty unforgiving nature in terms of performance, it's not uncommon to see drivers make a career change. At the end of the day, it's not often that F1 allows for second chances for unproven drivers, especially given that reserve roles have kind of been pretty useless in terms of actually making a full-time comeback. This makes a reality of being a world-class driver, but not really having anywhere to go. This frames IndyCar as an open ground for a fresh start and a chance for drivers to still race in a highly touted open-wheel series and build a career in the States, but it doesn't really work the other way. Due to the lack of proper credibility and struggles with super licenses, in the modern day, IndyCar isn't built to siphon drivers over to F1. The door really opens one way, and it's both because of structural and external reasons. The obvious thing to point at is the super license, which is why Colton Herta made the swap over to F2 this year. The super license is an amount of points you need to accumulate to drive in F1. That can be earned by placing well in other series, like F2, IndyCar, and plenty more. But series award different amounts of points. You need 40 of these points to be in F1, and the IndyCar system only awarded to the top 10 drivers, and not much if you're not finishing in the top 3. Another thing worth mentioning here is that the 40 points must be accrued in the span of 3 years, so any longer than that, and your points start to expire. This was revised for 2026 and onward, and more points are being awarded. And over time, we'll actually be able to see if more IndyCar drivers can make it to F1, but that's more of a wait and see kind of thing, because it only really benefits young drivers starting now. Speaking of the young drivers, F1 seems to take quite an interest in them. Take a look at two of the most recent rookies in the sport, Arvid Lindblad and Kimi Antonelli. Both of these guys entered F1 at the age of 18, the minimum in terms of what's allowed. Now IndyCar on the other hand, most rookies that enter the space from junior programs are usually around 21 years old. Now by the time these guys have made a splash in IndyCar and people start to think they can perform in F1, they're at an age where F1 teams become less interested, especially because the barrier for entry is so low nowadays. I'm not saying people in their 20s are old, but by the philosophy followed here, it is. There are also plenty of skills that are developed in IndyCar that just have no correlation to F1. Like take a look at ovals. They're very precise and you need skill to master them, but even if a driver performs highly on them, there genuinely is no counterpart on F1. And it's not really a translatable skill that they can carry over. So it kind of dilutes credibility in a sense. Finally, you have to take into note that F1 is just flat out hard to get into. With only 22 seats and a lot of them being locked down, it's a struggle for any hot prospect, whether that be an IndyCar driver or not, to get recognition. I mean, F2 is supposed to be a direct feeder series into F1, and nowadays you have multiple F2 champions not finding themselves with an F1 seat. So if that doesn't highlight the scarcity of opportunity, I don't know what does. As it stands in the modern day, it just creates a bit of a disparity in opportunity for both of the series. IndyCar gives opportunity, but it's not the same series that F1 is, as it's a lot more exclusive, and therefore has less availability. But it isn't saying that the move hasn't been made in the past. We have had drivers make the swap over and find success, but it came back in the kart era in the late 1990s. Juan Pablo Montoya is the first to mention, as he had one Indy 500 win and a kart championship prior to joining F1 in 2001, and he achieved 7 wins in F1. Also, 1997 F1 World Champion Jacques Villeneuve also started his career in kart and won the Indy 500 in 1995. It is worth mentioning kart was separate from IndyCar at this time, but kept the same concept that IndyCar follows today after the merger. The point here is that it isn't unmarked territory, but it was a lot different back then than it is today. Back in the late 90s, the junior categories we see surrounding F1 today were a lot different, and they allowed for a lot more entry from other avenues. In today's world, it doesn't quite follow the same philosophy, as it's rare to see F1 drivers come from anywhere but F2, and if anything, more F2 drivers end up in IndyCar than they do F1. Anyways, now that we've kind of established why IndyCars can't get into F1 easily, let me run you through why it's easier to go the other way. Now, let's be honest, there are plenty of F1 drivers that don't succeed, but a large reason a good amount of them can't deliver is because of the disparity in machinery. So when a driver doesn't succeed at a slower team, IndyCar provides the opportunity, because despite having time in F1, a lot of these guys haven't actually gotten to prove themselves. Usually coming into Indy, the adjustment is actually quite big. To begin with ovals, they're a completely new domain, and as I mentioned earlier, there is no counterpart in F1 that drivers have to prepare for them whatsoever. The cars are also a lot different with no power steering and a lot different tire wear, and a spec chassis philosophy that creates a lot more close racing, and a system that's a lot more dependent on what's done on track, as the mix of refueling and no team orders introduces a fair few more variables. The truth here is, it's not impossible to do good right away, but there is an adjustment period, and it does require humility and perseverance. It happened with Romain Grosjean with getting up to pace on ovals, and it's currently happening with Mick Schumacher, and it tends to happen with most of these guys. But getting through that period is the difference maker. For those who survived it, they thrived in it. Like I mentioned with Grosjean, by the end of his first year, he had 3 podium trophies in his cupboard. And Marcus Ericsson, who was kind of mid in F1, has won 4 races in his time in the States, including an Indy 500 win in 2022. As I mentioned earlier, these guys dwelled on the lower end of F1, in both results and machinery, but the spec series that is IndyCar unlocks talent that was hidden prior. If you're slow, it's you, not the car, and therefore, results make genuine career revivals that wouldn't happen anywhere else. Now with that, let's take a look at some of the chances for change. The most obvious opportunity for an IndyCar driver to move to F1 is Colton Herta, as he's already started his journey. He moved to F2, not F1, in order to get the super license points he needs more reliably. What I will say is this isn't the best example to use to set precedent, because it took a whole new team entering F1 to give Colton Herta a chance. So using it as an example really sets a very high bar for a barrier for entry. Otherwise, the only driver we've seen consistent F1 rumors for is Pato O'Ward, but to be honest, none of them have really been convincing. McLaren seemingly have just dangled a carrot in front of O'Ward, and he's gotten the reserve role, but with the way things are going over there, a full-time ride doesn't even seem to be a possibility. As for Alex Palou, he's had those discussions with McLaren as well, but as we know, that just ended up with a big old court case. One case I do find very interesting though is Scott Dixon, who actually had an opportunity to be a reserve driver in F1 in 2004 for Williams, but he denied the opportunity to keep building his career in IndyCar. He was fresh off his first championship and saw a better future building an IndyCar rather than moving to F1. I think the biggest thing to highlight here is people seem to forget that F1 really isn't a long-term play. A very finite amount of drivers actually last in F1 for a very long career, and sticking in another series like Indy, IMSA, WEC, or any other for that matter, can offer a much longer and more lucrative career. In this case, Dixon didn't miss out. He made a deliberate choice that's led him to a long and successful career. What you'll start to realize is the door could be opening from IndyCar to F1, but does it really need to? Sure, there are going to be moments where there are some crossovers, but not everything motorsport related needs to lead to F1. Colton Herta's path exists because of Cadillac, and you can also look at drivers like Mick Schumacher moving to Indy for what he quotes to be a long-term move. At the end of the day, we have to take note of the fact that F1 and IndyCar are just very different. Sure, it'd be entertaining if we see certain drivers in F1 or the other way around, but I don't think rumors about F1 need to be a thing for every driver that succeeds in any racing series for that matter. It's good that accessibility is opening up as an option, but in my opinion, in a series where racing is so great and drivers can succeed, IndyCar doesn't need to feed F1 to be worth watching. It just needs to keep being IndyCar.